Welcome to Why Airplanes Crash. Last week I did a full review on UTAir 579, Boeing 737, who make an overrun in Sochi for about 2 years ago, and all on board survived that crash. And today I have a guest, Peter Lundgren. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Your aviation career took place in Stockholm in the late 80s.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
went to the United States, converted, and then you came back to Sweden, converted to a Swedish license.
Mm.
And then you flew with various operators, and one of them was Fly Nordic, with Fly MD-80
That's true.
for about 5 years.
Yeah, about 5 years.
And then you moved on to Norwegian,
Yeah,
and you flew the 737,
yeah,
both Classic and 800.
yeah. Mostly the 800, but I started with the Classic.
Very good. And you have accumulated 15,000 hours,
Yeah,
and there are 10,000 as commander.
yeah, that's true.
So they're coming into Sochi in this weather, and Sochi is known for these harsh weather conditions. And on the first approach, coming down to 850 feet, they receive a predictive wind shear warning called wind shear ahead. Peter, what does that mean?
Well, the system, the weather radar system, detects a wind shear ahead of the aircraft. That means you should perform the wind shear escape maneuver.
All right. So just to describe, a wind shear means that when you come in for the landing, you have the wind in this direction, you're coming in here, you have the wind here, but suddenly the wind changes, you get tailwind. That's the wind shear, and that's why it's so important to abandon, get away from that cell. And the wind shear escape maneuver, so how do you do that practically in the cockpit?
First, you call out as a pilot flying that you call out wind shear escape maneuver, and then you increase the thrust to maximum thrust. You do that manually. So you principally you firewall the thrust levers.
Okay, so full thrust. What
Yeah.
about the configuration?
You don't change configuration during a wind shear escape maneuver. You
Okay, so you leave the flaps in gear.
Yeah, you keep the configuration, and then you fly out. You have the flight director gives you guidance how to fly out of it,
Okay.
pitch wise, because what you're trying to do is to trade airspeed for altitude.
Okay,
So that's what the system gives you information about.
right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case, the crew ignored the warning, continued to descend along the glide path, and now it's the right pilot, the co-pilot, this pilot flying, and he comes to minimum, this minimum call, automatic minimum call from the aircraft, and he's just silent. What is the procedure in normal cases when it comes to this call minimum?
Well, I think depends on the operator, but if you arrive at your minimum altitude and you don't see the runway, you call go around. Some airlines have a call out that you call contact, meaning that you see the runway. Eventually, some airlines maybe say landing. That call out will differ, but at least you say something like
Yeah.
contact.
You say something,
Contact
and
or
that's
go
because the
around.
other pilot
Yeah.
should be in the loop, so
Yeah, of
both
course.
pilots know what's going on,
Yeah,
and both pilots know what the pilot flying's intentions are.
That's
okay,
true.
so the co-pilot in this case is very quiet, and then they receive another warning saying wind shear. And what is that?
Yeah, that's then it's a wind shear. They are in the wind shear. It's not a predictive wind shear.
Okay, so
anymore.
now it's not ahead; they are in the wind shear.
Yeah.
And can you continue then?
No, of course not. You have to do the wind shear escape maneuver.
Yeah, so that's again is a hard one. So now it's the second hard warning that they then ignore. And again they continue, and they both continue and also start discussing who is looking out, who is looking in, and stuff like
That's
that.
the wrong place to discuss that. Should
Definitely
be
the wrong place.
worked out during the approach briefing,
Yeah.
which you do before actually you start to descend.
And the co-pilot, he's still pilot flying, and at 50 feet, that's 15 meters above the runway, the captain finally takes over and performs a go-around,
Yeah.
leaving the runway. They climb up.
Yeah, and I guess they did the go-around procedure instead of the wind shear escape maneuver,
Exactly,
which
they did
is,
not do. So what's the difference? What's a normal go-around then?
Well, normal go-around you do when you decide to do a go around because you don't see the runway, for example,
Okay.
and the other ambient conditions are within limits, like the wind and so then you change the configuration while you're climbing, but in the wind shear you don't change the configuration.
Yeah, so the normal go around, like going around.
Yeah, you set the flaps,
Flaps 15.
and the thrust, of course, and then you raise the gear, and after a while you start to retract flaps.
You clean
But
up
that's a big difference from the wind shear escape maneuver.
Exactly. Right. So they do a go around, they climb up, and during the go around they struggle a bit to find the correct modes to engage the autopilot, and it creates a lot of stress and irritation in the flight deck.
Yeah.
And they also requested a new approach immediately, back to landing again. And we should also mention it's the middle of the night, so it's not the best time of the day perhaps.
No.
So the second approach, they come now in, and at 1100 feet, they have another warning, says monitor radar display. What's that?
Yeah, that's a call out from the system that you should monitor your weather radar display for another wind shear warning.
So that means you can continue the approach?
Yeah, you can, of course, do that, but be aware there is a wind shear ahead.
Exactly. But so that's sort of a caution.
Yeah,
it's information
to
for your
alertness,
commander.
to be alert for eventually wind shear.
So continue or leave. Right. But 5 seconds after that, they receive again the same as the first one, wind shear ahead.
Yeah, I mean with the previous approach, and you have this warning with monitor radar display, diversion maybe have been a good thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Or join a holding to wait for a while, but yeah, in my opinion.
So what happens now is they ignore this warning, they continue the approach. Now the captain is punt flying, and they again start discussing what's going on. And at about 75 feet above the ground, what's that, about 25 meters above the ground, the captain then, he disconnects the autopilot, the auto throttle takes over manually, and go in for landing. And what is the recommendation from Boeing regarding autopilot and auto throttle during an approach?
Well, first of all, the autopilot disengaged height is 156 feet, so they were below the minimum autopilot disengaged height. And the other thing about the Boeing philosophy is if you disengage the autopilot, you also disengage the auto thrust.
They touched down then more than 1,200 meter in on a 3,000 meter runway. What about on the max landing weight Boeing 777-800 on the dry runway, zero wind? How much runway do you need?
Well, for the stopping, like 900 meters, but to be legal, you need extra margin for that. So you have to add some extra margin for that.
So about 1,500-1,600 meters.
Yeah, like that, 1,500
okay,
meters.
1,500 meters.
So you could stop, but that's on a dry runway.
Exactly, on the dry. So
Yeah.
this one is wet, and they have an excessive speed of 30 knots.
Yeah,
What will happen with the
you're-
runway then?
Well, it's you cannot stop the aircraft because of the excessive speed, and then also the wet runway, of course, increases landing distance. The normal add-on for a wet runway compared to a dry runway is 15%.
Okay, 15%.
Yeah, extra safety margin compared to the dry runway case.
According to the investigators, the Boeing analysis of this is, even though they landed more than 1,200 meters in on the runway with excessive speed, but if they had taken the reverse immediately, according to Boeing, sort of just counting figures, they say they most likely had stopped before the runway end.
Yeah.
So the reverses is very important. And
they are.
just to
Especially
explain for the view, the reverses is like what
well,
do
you
say?
change the direction of the jet outflow.
Peter, if I ask you, if you look back to your commercial aviation, or you can go back even to the flight school more than 30 years ago, what is your experience of culture and attitudes with operators you've been working for?
Well, it's been a just culture, I would say, all the time. So which means that we have a reporting system, and if something happens, we report it, and we don't get sort of penalized for doing mistakes and stuff like that, because we do some mistakes. All pilots do, but then if we follow procedures, the system works. Like if someone does a mistake, the system detects it. That's the
flight data monitor.
Yeah, I mean the soft system on board with the teamwork. We confirm all changes, mode changes, and so if I hit the wrong button, my colleague will notify that's the wrong button for this mode we're in, or for the mode we want. So we work in a team.
You work in a team. There's constant dialogue.
Yeah.
And you both know what pilot flying, pilot monitoring, captain, first officer's duties.
Exactly. So we stick to the procedures and keep it that way. So that means that the system works.
But when you flew for Norwegian for about 10 years, I know that Norwegian had, what do you have in Norwegian, 40, 50 different kind of nationalities, something like that, from all over the world, almost, at least all over Europe.
Yeah.
And do you still find that everybody was working, they followed the SOP, or?
Yeah, I would say that.
Would say that, yeah.
Yeah, because it's. I mean, the major part was origin from Scandinavia, where we have this culture of following rules, but without exercising some sort of unnecessary authority as a captain. It's a teamwork, so it's a relaxed situation, but we stick to the procedures. I would say that's really good, because it's a efficient way of flying an airplane, to have a good teamwork.
In this crash, what puzzles me is that both pilots are very experienced. They have 26,000 hours, more than 11,000 hours on the type.
Yeah, that's a lot of experience, definitely.
It's a lot of experience, and when you read the report, you can see that they are more or less working on their own SOP, their own procedure. It's like they're not following the company procedures. They set their own minimums. They sort of ignore. They even at one stage say that, shall we just play dumb and continue the flight?
Yeah.
So
that's a strange attitude.
It's a
completely
really
wrong attitude.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's it's a bit sloppy attitude from the captain, and I can also see.
Yeah, because he has to set the standard.
Exactly.
So, but he doesn't do that.
So that's right. So what you say now is, when you, before a flight, you meet your colleague, the first officer in the crew room, and then you say that you set the standard. What do you mean with that?
Well, you set a certain standard of how to. I mean, it starts with the planning and the whole attitude that we really do some flight planning, and we do it by the book, and then when we start flying, we follow these standard operating procedures and stick to our call-outs and everything. So you're showing that this is the standard that we're supposed to use.
Okay, so what you say is that if a captain meet the co-pilot in the crew room and he's like, don't worry, we just go see what happens. Then you mean that the co-pilot will
eventually, if because it's some co-pilots maybe, well, many I think try to raise the standard, but of course it's harder for a co-pilot to raise the standard than it is for a captain to raise the standard. If he thinks the co-pilot doesn't really have the standard. So
but what can the company do about this?
they have to be encourage people, of course, to follow the procedures, and it's from the training. It starts with the training, the classroom first on the conversion training, and then continues through the simulator training and the line training. So it's important to set the standard there.
So if you have a flight management, I did a review on the SAS crash in Gotthard a couple of weeks ago, and yes, they have a just culture, no blame policy already 30 years ago, and they encourage the commanders to be commanders and encourage the co-pilots to really stand up and challenge the captain. So is that what you mean is the way forward to reduce the number of crashes?
Yeah, one way of doing it, of course, but you have to, if the captain doesn't have the standard, of course, first officers must speak up, and eventually that will lead to write a report.
Yeah,
of course, if it's really serious.
Certainly does.
Yeah,
so we can summarize that culture and attitudes has a huge impact on flight safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Very big impact.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you so lot
for joining us to Why Airplanes Crash.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you
good.
very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Why Airplanes Crash. Next week we will do a review of Fly Dubai crash in Sochi 4 years ago. Stay tuned and see you in the next episode. Thanks.